Okay, now we're going to get into this reading again. It would take a while to do this whole series. Very few people will hear this, but they should. In my book, and the book we're reading out of is "Origins of the Gods" by Andrew Collins and Gregory L. Little. We're reading the first section coming from Mr. Little. The image that you're looking at is from a guy who went by the name of Mr. Butterbud, who filmed a Bigfoot in the sky. That's not artist rendering. Please let people know about my new channel, if you will. Refer people to my new channel. We are up to 43 subs. And we need to get that up, don't we? We got a lot of things to talk about in the spiritual realm and God and creation and looking at it from a different angle or two. And I'm very tired. Last night was a long show, and looked at a lot of images, and it's funny how everyone sees things a little bit differently, but there's definitely something in those images, isn't there? Monday, that'll be Rob Toplis. That's how I pronounce it. He's from Great Britain. He's from England, and he says he's seen Bigfoot there. So, and he said the prayer didn't work for him, so that should be interesting to see. Compare notes, see why. What did I do right, and what did he maybe not do? Maybe we should even say that. What were the differences between the two of us? So, anyways, now the three mystical, spiritual, life-changing events. Of course, there's that magical number 3, and of course, it would be on chapter 11 as well. And here we go. The scientific method can be defined rather simply as a systematic process performed to find truth. That is, the scientific process is a method to get to the truth about a specific observation, thing, event, or phenomena. We won't go into depth on the scientific process, but it relies on observation, forming a hypothesis about the observation, testing the hypothesis through the experimentation, and replicating the results through more research. When a particular hypothesis is repeatedly confirmed, it becomes a theory and often gets incorporated into scientific doctrine until someone comes along and disproves it or has a better explanation. The law of parsimony, or Occam's razor, is usually part of the evaluation process. Occam's razor implies that the simplest explanation that accounts for all the observations and results is often the best or the correct solution. One major problem in evaluating events such as UFOs, abductions, and conductees' experiences, Native American cosmology/beliefs, and the experiences of people like Swedenborg, is that the observations and events cannot be replicated. They are spontaneous events, sometimes one of a kind. To a very large degree, that's why science casts a skeptical eye on all of them. The simplest explanation for paranormal events always boils down to a few possibilities: hoaxes, lies, misinterpretations, or mental derangement. I will add that there has been some real laboratory experimentations done that replicates to some degree UFO and mystical experiences, and some of that research will be described in chapters 15, 16, and 17. However, this general inability to replicate such experiences in a laboratory is a big important issue lurking in the background that has to be considered. Science generally evaluates repeatable phenomena. Most paranormal events simply don't repeat reliably or consistently. They can be random events or sometimes a unique experience that seems inexplicable. Even more importantly, experiences resulting from mental derangement or psychosis can be almost indistinguishable from a genuine mystical experience. Conversely, genuine mystical experiences can be almost indistinguishable from mental derangement or psychosis. It's easy for those who deny the possibility of an, quote, unseen world, unquote, intruding on ours to just see it as all mental derangement and simply hoaxes. History is filled with inexplainable events, and a few of these are very impressive. In this chapter, we will look at just 3 such cases. What they point to are 2 primary possibilities. The first possibility is that some visionary experiences created by psychosis, delusions, or hallucinatory experiences are followed by a remarkable series of seemingly impossible coincidences that confirm the delusions given in the visions. The second possibility is that there is some other external force that intrudes into our reality, with the results changing history. Joan of Arc. Virtually everyone is familiar with the name Joan of Arc. Most people know the story from movies, which only give it the briefest, often incorrect, and somewhat sensationalized account of the Maid of Orleans, the heroine of France. During Joan of Arc's trial in 1431, extensive transcripts were made that revealed considerable details of her visions and actions. These transcripts told of how she first had her visions and how they continued. A fascinating, highly detailed book published in 1936 provided a rather deep view into her experiences by including extensive information from the many others who had interacted with her during her brief time. Joan of Arc, from 1412 to 1431, was considered to be a very ordinary, pious peasant girl. At the age of 13, while she was tending the sheep, she saw a luminous, bright cloud descend to the ground, and a calm male voice emanated from it. Joan told her mother about the event, but not her father. Her mother was supportive, but also decided not to tell her husband. Initially, the voice was gentle and encouraged her to remain pious and kind. Joan was frightened by it, but she returned to the same spot, and the light started to appear more frequently. Gradually, the beings behind the light manifested physically. She was told by the voice that Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret would appear to her. Then she was told that she had been chosen to restore the kingdom of France from English rule. She was to wear men's clothing and become the head of the French army, which was then unsuccessfully fighting the English. She found the instructions to be beyond the realm of possibility. It took 3 years for her to get the courage to do what the voice instructed. In her trial, she related that all of her actions were taken in accordance with the instructions given to her. In 1428, she began the quest, but was thwarted in her initial efforts to visit the Dauphin, I guess it's Dauphine, Charles the Seventh, heir of the French throne. The voice then told her to visit an uncle for help, whom she saw in 1429. Her uncle provided her with a horse, a sword, men's clothing. But by the time Jonah had become widely known throughout France because of her predictions and intentions, had spread quickly among the populace desperately looking for hope. It is known that the Dauphin and other French royalty were quite aware of the young peasant girl who claimed that God had told her to restore the French crown and fulfill an old prophecy. Joan's notoriety among the people is the most likely reason the Dauphin gradually agreed to meet her. Joan made many predictions during this time, one of them being that she would be wounded in the first battle. She was also told by the voice that when she finally met the Dauphin, she'd have 1 year to achieve her quest. Both of those predictions turned out to be true. Jonah finally met the Dauphin in 1429. In a private meeting with Charles, she asked him to give her armor and supplies and to make her the head of the army. Inexplicably, Charles granted her request. She soon left for France, the French city of Orleans, which had been besieged by the English army for 5 months. It is generally thought that the Dauphin was convinced that Jonah was telling the truth, that she had actually come under instructions from God. In just 8 days, Jonah and her followers drove the English from Orleans. It was surrounding outposts, but she was wounded by an arrow, as she predicted. She then led the French army in a series of other battles that were quickly won, and Jonah's forces managed to push the English army across the coast. The famous sword that Jonah found, has been depicted in various movies as being recovered in a field. However, it was actually found where it had been hidden in the church. It had lain undisturbed since being deposited there by its owner, the celebrated Frankish military leader and statesman Charles Martel, 688 to 741 CE, who had successfully saved France from Moorish invasion 600 years earlier. The sword was found in 1430, precisely where Jonah said it would be. In March of 1430, England and France signed a truce, but the English soon laid siege on the city of Compiègne, I don't know how to pronounce it. Compiègne. Jonah hurried to the city, but was betrayed and captured by the English. In 1430, she was imprisoned in the French city of Rouen and tried for heresy and cross-dressing as a man. She was burned alive on May 30, 1431, and they're savage. They're just savages. Who's the real savage in all this, to be honest? In 1456, another court declared her innocence, and in 1920, she was canonized by the Catholic Church. It is an intriguing but sad story filled with symbolism and paranormal phenomena. It is not feasible to give the story a full telling here, since it is almost beyond the realm of possibility. Modern skeptical accounts relate that her experiences with the voice were hallucinatory, the result of mental disorder, epilepsy, or hoaxing. However, the visionary experiences detailed in her trial are extremely detailed and highly similar to UFO accounts. The reports of contactees and the experience reported by Swedenborg, Jonah's visions were always accompanied by a brilliant light which would appear first. She reported that she learned that the male voice she heard was Saint Michael. She also saw Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret. She testified that all three of them appeared to her at once several times. They appeared in the light, and they were physically real. She related that on one occasion she physically hugged them. She also saw that Angel Gabriel with hundreds of other angels standing behind him. In brief, she stated that they always appeared in light. She saw them, touched them, and often felt their physical warmth. There is also one report of a witness, Guy D. Kelly, who watched Jonah speaking to the light. He saw the same vision as Jonah, the light, and the beings of the light on the night before Jonah first entered Orleans in 1429. In her summary statement about Joan of Arc, the writer V. Sackville West asked, quote, "Is the visible world the only world we have to consider? Is it possible for mortal man to get into touch with beings from another world? I believe deeply in some mysterious central or originating force, in what we conveniently call the supernatural." End of quote. There is no doubt that Joan changed the course of history, that many of her predictions came to pass, and that she was not hoaxing. That is, she believed that she had been in contact with with supernatural forces. Of course, as stated previously, skeptics usually cite schizophrenia or other mental disorders as a source of her visions. I will mention that I know of no other cases of schizophrenic hallucinations that led to such a remarkable set of coincidences between the content of the hallucinations and the corresponding events that followed. In some, either something truly remarkable intruded into the world of Jonah, or her hallucinations produced influential and prophetic coincidences. For skeptics, it won't matter how much evidence is given. Their point of view is that it had to be hallucinatory. Edgar Cayce. There are several excellent biographies accurately describing Edgar Cayce's life, 1877 to 1945. So it seems pointless to recount the entire story, but the skeptics rarely address some of the most incredible events that are well documented from his life. So a brief description of Cayce's background is necessary, especially in explaining how such topics as ancient extraterrestrial visitations to Earth emerged in his psychic readings. However, it should be noted that this is only a brief chronology that leaves out many important and significant events. Casey's early life. Casey was born on a farm 8 miles south of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in 1877, into a deeply religious Christian family. I have always found it an interesting coincidence that Casey's farm was just 16 miles from the site of the famous 1955 Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins case, which occurred 8 miles north of Hopkinsville. During his early life, Casey often conversed with dead relatives and groups of little folk and fairy-like beings. After he witnessed the death of his grandfather, Casey was 4 years old when it happened. He was found conversing with his deceased, invisible to others, grandfather several times. As he grew older, Casey continued to see more and more little people, entities that played and conversed with him. By the age of 12, Casey was teased and was known to get into fights with other school children, apparently because the rumor was that he talked to ghosts. Around the same age, Casey was failing in school and struggling with spelling. When his father found that Casey couldn't spell the word cabin, he punished the young man. During the episode, Casey asked his father if he could take a brief nap. He subsequently slept on the spelling book. After his nap, his father reported that Casey knew every word in the book, word for word. He could tell his father what words were on each page and their exact place on the page. He related that he could visualize every page. After this event, Casey allegedly had the ability to sleep on any book and memorize it. Word for word, page for page. My belief is that Casey leafed through the books prior to falling asleep on them. There is a phenomenon commonly referred to as photographic memory, also known as eidetic memory. Okay. That's EIDETIC. It is somewhat controversial in psychology and thought to occur mostly in childhood. It is the ability to look at an object or a page in a book and then be able to visualize and recall the image perfectly. Sleeping immediately following the study is known as an aid to memory consolidation. Those people with their memory, memory? Okay. And those people which eidetic memory may well find that sleeping after viewing book pages enhances their memory. Casey himself stated that he mentally, quote, saw pictures of the page, end quote. I will certainly concede that sleeping on a book without ever opening it and having a photographic memory of its context is virtually unheard of in scientific literature. That's the reason I believe he may have flipped through the books before sleeping on them. Casey became somewhat of a local celebrity at a young age because of this ability to memorize vast amounts of material. When Casey was 14, a former U.S. congressman named Jim McKenzie, who had just been appointed to be the ambassador of Peru by President Cleveland, put his memory to the test by asking a $10 wager with Casey's father. Casey was to memorize word for word a 110-page speech that the congressman had presented while in Congress. The manuscript was not allowed to touch the young man's hands. The speech was read aloud to Casey on 2 consecutive nights by his father. After each reading was completed, Casey fell asleep. The next day, Casey stood in his schoolhouse in front of Mackenzie and recited the entire speech verbatim. Over 50 other people witnessed the event, including teachers, a reporter, and a local businessman. The feat was reported in a newspaper article in the Kentucky New Era. But Casey's ability didn't end there. As with Joan of Arc, at the age of 13, there's that 13 again, 3 and 13, 11, all that, Casey, 33, all right, Casey experienced a visitation from what is described as an angel. He related that the event took place in his bedroom after spending the day in the woods reading the Bible. While he was praying, the room filled with bright light. Casey felt himself rise. Then he saw a glowing angel in front of him. After a brief exchange, the angel told Casey to help the sick, the afflicted. Reportedly, it took him 3 years to get the courage to tell his mother about the encounter. A year after telling his mother about the visitation, Casey had another encounter with an angel. It was this visitation that led him to move from the farm in Hopkinsville in 1894. Casey becomes the sleeping prophet. In March 1900, Casey became, well, this is, I can see why this one dude I know says you got to sleep all this. Okay. Casey became an apprentice in a photography shop in Hopkinsville, but he suddenly developed paralysis of his vocal cords and lost the ability to speak above a whisper. The local doctors were at a complete loss on how to treat him. And this led to his psychic readings. Early the next year, a traveling hypnotist visited Hopkinsville, and at the urging of many locals attending the event, the hypnotist brought Casey to the stage. As he was a local celebrity, the audience was interested in what would happen to him. Surprisingly, under hypnosis, Casey was able to speak normally, but after the trance was lifted, his voice went back to a whisper. A different hypnosis visiting Hopkinsville from New York then hypnotized Casey with the same results. Casey then conferred with the local osteopath and hypnosis named L. Lane. On March 31, 1901, Casey performed his first psychic reading on himself at the suggestion of Lane and another doctor who was present. Under a trance state, Casey diagnosed his own problem and suggested that the subject himself increased circulation in his throat area. His throat grew bright red. He spit out some blood, and when he was awakened, he spoke perfectly. The first patient after Casey was the osteopath Lane himself. Lane had tried everything medical to treat a gastrointestinal problem, to no avail, and he figured since the sleeping Casey could heal himself, maybe he could do the same for him. The hypnotized Casey diagnosed Lane's problem and recommended a remedy, which worked. Lane was both elated and surprised. Word spread in the community, and health readings were soon done for other locals. It is estimated that about 80 health readings were done during this very early time. In a newspaper article in 1922, Casey related that he had helped 8,056 people through readings he gave from 1901 to 1922. But only 400 of these readings were documented, meaning the entire transcript is retained by the O.R.D, the Association of Research and Enlightenment, the official Casey organization. Unfortunately, most of the transcripts of these early readings were given to the individual requesting them, and they were never returned. From 1922 until his death in 1945, he gave about 14,000 readings, all of which were fully documented. Today, 14,306 readings were available for view at the O.R.D Library in Virginia Beach, and are online in a searchable database for members of the organization. The typewritten volumes of readings contained over 150,000 pages. It should be noted that when he awakened after a reading, Casey was totally unaware of what had transpired. That is one major reason the readings were written down. Not long after his first readings, it was found that the patient did not have to be physically present for a health reading. When Casey went into his self-induced hypnotic trance, he was able to telepathically zero in on the individual and the words, quote, "Yes, we have the body here," end quote, were often the first ones uttered by the sleeping Casey. He would scan the body, note various ailments and their causes, and then usually recommend actions. Then he would usually say, "Ready for questions?" and answer them. When he was through with the reading, he usually stated, "We are through for the present." Casey has sometimes been referred to as a psychic diagnostician. I can't say the word. Diagnostician, or the diagnostician, something like that. I mean, diagnostician. In 1903, Casey married Gertrude Evans, and they moved to Bowling Green, Kentucky. In 1906, many local Bowling Green doctors began studying Casey's ability, but several disastrous fires left Casey in financial ruin. He remained in Bowling Green until 1909, when he had paid off all his debts, and the Caseys moved back to Hopkinsville and then to Alabama. However, while in Hopkinsville, Dr. Wesley Kitchum visited Casey and witnessed several readings. Kitchum and various other physicians were deeply impressed. At the complete loss, we're deeply impressed and at a complete loss as to how Casey was able to diagnose patients so accurately and how his recommended remedies usually worked. After evaluating Casey's health readings, In 1910, Ketchum presented a paper on Casey at the medical conference held at Caltech in Pasadena, California. Ketchum then allowed another physician to present the paper at a medical conference at Harvard to over 500 physicians. All this was unknown to Casey at the time. When it was presented at Harvard, the paper caught the attention of the press, which initiated inquiries in Hopkinsville and other places where Casey had lived. Reporters interviewed several physicians and people who had readings from Casey. On October 9, 1910, the New York Times began publishing a series of articles on him. So other newspapers around the country published articles about him, and he was inundated with requests for health readings. The newspapers dubbed him the Sleeping Prophet, a man who became a doctor when sleeping, but he was also described as illiterate. This, of course, wasn't true, and it disturbed him when he first read the articles. His fame came suddenly and unexpectedly, as did the title of the Sleeping Prophet. But his fame led to huge amounts of mail requesting readings, and he continued to give readings as part of various agreements he made with others. Past life reading emerged. So past life readings emerge. Casey. That might be a good place to stop. I don't know what to do. Want to stop there or not? I'm getting tired. Let's see. Casey's life in the university. I think that'd probably be a good place to stop. Anyways, let me get into that Casey. We're getting there, man. We're getting there, folks. We were almost 1/3 of the way done that book. This book's a damn good book. It really is a damn good book. Hope I don't get too much trouble reading it, but I'm not asking for any money. Yeah, I don't get paid to do any of this. Let's put it that way.
You're going to try. Go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.